The following are highlights of Wisdom for Wealth with Greg Pinio, brought to you by Reach Returns.
I would like to think that after a day of Wisdom for Wealth, that you have a fresh perspective on real estate investing, a perspective that is different than you had before, that possibilities exist that you didn't ever think could exist. I would like to think that. I would like to think that you're motivated, that you have prioritized some space in your life to focus on your own acquisitions, and that you've identified specifically where you're going and why you're wanting to get there. The brief history of me is middle class, 2 solid parents, 1 brother, extremely conservative. We learned to work hard. We learned to be honest. We were not born into any money. My parents still live very simply. But along the way, I had a couple mentors who were, and one is still with me, extraordinary people. I was fortunate enough to spend enough time with them and still continue to spend time with one to be present to the idea that it's more than just working hard and working honestly. It takes a lot more than that to get ahead. It takes seeing things differently. It takes understanding some principles of investing, understanding some principles of leverage, understanding some basics that do not come to you by birthright. They certainly didn't come to me that way. The short version was that I knew early on that when I graduated from high school, that was the last night I would be spending living under my parents' roof. It wasn't a bad thing, it was just a knowledge thing. So my research into where I was going and what I was going to do started in high school. Through some research, some luck, I ended up purchasing a home. $25,000, $1,000 down, $24,000 on a note, 7% interest, $206.10 a month was my payment. And I rented 2 rooms in my home to my best friends that I graduated from high school with, who were also going to the university, and they paid me $100 a month each. Well, a revelation hit me the first month that my first mortgage payment was due. When I sat down to pay that mortgage payment, Jeff and Kelly laid $100 each on my desk the same moment I was writing my rent check, and it occurred to me that Jeff and Kelly were buying me this house, that I was living in my own home for $6 and a dime. That was a revelation. That hit me hard. To say hard would be an understatement. It knocked me over. And at that moment, I became somewhat obsessed with the thought that I need to buy more of these, whereby the people renting them are paying for my house. Because all you need to add to that equation is time and care. And nothing but good things are going to happen. I could put that house on a 20-year amortization, meaning that if I made my payment for 20 years, it would be free and clear. And I could envision at 18 years old being 38, going, this house would be free and clear. If I did nothing more than mow the lawn, keep it kept up, maintain it, 20 years later, somebody else has purchased a home for me. Who knows what it would be worth in 20 years? One thing for certain, a lot more than it was worth today. What started then was a very simple equation. a very simple mathematical equation. If I could collect enough rent that would make all of my expense payments on a piece of property, this was a good thing. The equation has not gotten any more complicated nearly 30 years later. It is still my objective. How do you consistently achieve that desired end? How do you get there? How do you get from point A, owning nothing, to B, a piece of property where the rental income covers all of your expenses? Well, a lot of thoughts come to mind when I think about that broad brushstroke. But certainly the biggest part of the equation is that this is an acquisition between me as a buyer and a seller who is a person. It's about building relationships. It is about planting seeds. It's about being real. It's about following through. And that my version of real estate is about people. It's not about a distant, I'm a buyer, over there's a seller, some agent in between. It doesn't let me get near the seller. I'm face to face with sellers. I'm engaging with them as people. I'm understanding that as we sit down and we're trying to work out a deal between them and myself, what I'm looking to do is take a very unformed lump of clay and together handcraft it into a perfect sculpture that meets my objectives perfectly and their directives, objectives perfectly as well. And to do that, it's about having a willingness to get in front of people and be face to face. And yet that willingness is ill-achieved without a toolbox to know how in the heck you get the job done. This isn't about just standing around and holding hands and being warm and fuzzy. I've got a direction I'm going, and the more tools I have to get there, the better. An electrician, you've pictured them. They wear this huge belt around their waist. Huge belt. And it's got 1,800 little screwdrivers. And you think, my God, man, how many screwdrivers do you need? But every single one of those screwdrivers is different. These are the tools of real estate. Note, deed of trust, wrap note, lease option. All of these tools that we use to get from point A to point B fit each situation differently. Okay, so here you have an objective. I'm wanting to buy real estate. I'm wanting to get a piece of real estate that covers itself, well located, all of the principles of location and expandability, which I'd go into later. That toolbox is still worthless, absolutely worthless, without a proactive approach that does not disqualify the possibility. Every working day of my life, I hear somebody tell me what can't be done. I don't think in those terms. I only believe it can't be done if I am told no repeatedly and over a long period of time. Because no may mean a lot of things. No may mean this is just not a good time. No may mean I've got somebody sick that you don't even know about and I can't think in these terms right now. No may mean that I'm thinking of moving, but I'm not sure of that yet. I'm going to be told no 10, 12, 15 times before no is no. I certainly have trained myself not to disqualify the possibility before I'm told no. The mindset to make this toolbox effective starts with knowing where you are going, having a motivation to get there, and not disqualifying the possibility for that to exist until the possibility disqualifies itself. What I would challenge you to do is to take the asset base that you have to work with, add that to a toolbox of knowledge, and challenge you to buy one small building a year for the next 5 years that meets basic principles of investing. I am aware, although I disagree with their perspective, that people look at me as if I were a burning house with a wind, that I've got a lot going on. I've got a lot of properties. I'm busy. And yet, those that really know me know that my criterion for action is incredibly stringent and specific. You could make two categories out there in the real estate world. There are real estate investors and there are real estate speculators. The speculator is betting on the next growth area, the next freeway off-ramp, the next area to be. And certainly the area that we live in, you could speculate on next growth areas. I'm not a speculator. I'm going to areas that have been, always will be. Areas that have proven themselves over time to be the classics. Those areas that have solid neighborhood feels, that have romantic appeal start to finish, and that the deal itself meets very, very strict investment criterion. I'm an investor. I'm not a speculator. I'm not a gambler. We could make two other categories, and two other categories would be a real estate investment that follows strict investment principles, terms, location, expandability, and all of the subsets of those. And then there is Oz. Oz has no rhyme or reason. Oz has no justification in terms of finance, in terms of vacancy rates, in terms of location. If you want to live, 80 miles out of a major metropolitan area out in the middle of nowhere in a single wide, if that's Oz to you, go buy Oz. Oz is just a decision that doesn't need to be justified. I own a couple properties that are certainly Oz. No investment criterion or no investment thinking went into them. I just like them. Questions of proposition are questions that can be answered yes or no. Very simple. And in order to ask a question of proposition, you have to have clearly identified and answered the question, what do I want? What do I want? In order to get to where you're going then, from where you are to what you want, you need to ask questions of proposition. So I make it a habit every day, under the heading of what I want, all of the different categories of what I want, to write out 30, 40, 50, 100 questions of proposition that are small little steps to get me from point A to point B. There are multiple examples of how questions of proposition turn profitable. I think the point of questions of proposition is that, first of all, be bold and ask those questions of proposition. Secondly, the answer is definitely no unless you ask, right? The default is no. If you don't ask, the default is no. The possibility of a yes can be a huge, huge money yes. And I could give you example after example after example. Part of understanding the mechanics of real estate, which is what we cover, exhaustively, especially in the second day seminar, the Foundations for Freedom, are an intuitive understanding of what's better. And based on your own knowledge of what's better, you will be asking questions of proposition. For example, would you rather have a promissory note of $100,000 at 8% interest, or would you rather have a promissory note for $120,000 at 5% interest? Which is better if you're holding the property for 30 years? Knowing which is better allows you to ask the question to the seller, I understand that you'd like $100,000 in an 8% note. I have a question for you. Would you accept $120,000 but reduce the interest rate to, say, 5%? If they said yes, you just made money. And so questions of proposition increase as your knowledge level of what is better increases, all falling under the subset of what do you want? One of the things that is important in any relationship, and remember that when we are engaging ourselves with a seller face to face, like it or not, we are starting a relationship. In any relationship, you need to be where you are. Be 100% focused on what you're doing. Consequently, whenever I get out of my vehicle and walk in to meet a seller to talk about their real estate, I take off my watch. The minute you look at your watch, the assumption is that you're busy, you're under time constraints, that you likely need to be somewhere else soon. That just killed the deal right there. You may have to sit and listen to cat stories for 5 hours. And me particularly, I don't like cats. So that's about as painful as it gets, especially if they sit you on a couch that makes you sink up to your knees and there's cat hair all over it. That really gets me upset. But be where you are. That sincerity of time and space and attention is what is going to ignite that relationship and get it down the road quickly. Every relationship proceeds at a different pace. I have literally been in contact with some sellers for years, opening the door, staying in contact. I stay in front of them on a quarterly basis, at least with a phone call, a card, maybe a face-to-face, and understanding that what we're doing is we are starting a slow dance. And that dance goes on as long as it needs to go on until at some point, in some space, they say, okay, you know what, now's the time that I want to sell, and we sit down and we work out the deal. The dance doesn't stop there, though, because oftentimes now I've worked out a promissory note and deed of trust with that seller so that now I'm involved with them on a monthly basis, paying them every month. The dance continues. Now they're an investor. It's changed faces, but it continues. And so persistence, I suppose, is the key here. A no today doesn't mean that it's a no forever. Open the door, keep it open, allow the dance to continue. Well, I would hope by now that you're ready to roll. And one of the most important parts of getting going is assembling this team. Remember, acquisition of investment-grade real estate is a team sport. You know, you're the quarterback. You're the one directing all of the action. However, to think that you can take something from A to Z without a full team behind you is crazy. And so remember, we need to have relationships with 3 different lenders. You need to have that established. A 1 to 4 unit lender, a 5 unit and up lender, and a banker that does your day in and day out banking specifically that's able to give you an unsecured line of credit. Those are the 3 bankers that you need to know by name. They need to know you by name. This is somebody that on a quarterly basis you're taking out to lunch and recapping your life. Okay? Your escrow agent, somebody competent, that LPO that knows their stuff in and out, left and right. Not just check the box stuff, but promissory notes, deeds of trust, wrap notes, lease options, stuff that not every LPO is fluent in, so you need a relationship with that person that's bulletproof. Your title company representative is somebody that literally the customer service department of a title company is someone that you will deal with on a daily basis. Consequently, having a relationship with them so that when you call and say, Julie, this is Greg, I don't need to say anymore. It's Greg. I don't need to tell her my fax number. She knows my fax number. And I simply need to say, hey, listen, I need the Brown residence on 2419 63rd. I don't need to say anymore. She knows. She's faxing me a full property profile on that within the next 10 minutes. That takes a relationship to get that kind of feedback, that kind of service. Okay? The informants on the street, a little more vague concept, but as you'll remember, these are people that know what you want, what you're looking for, and who realize that if they turn you on to that lead, that they will be paid for this. Remember, the people that are most able to hear about things like that are barbers, policemen, garbage men, people who are literally out there nosing around all day or have a captive audience sitting there all day long. Dentists, believe it or not, are great informants on the street. Who would think that a dentist could get any information out of anybody? But this is a captive audience. And they're going to say, oh, well, we're thinking of selling our property. That dentist is going to perk his ears up, give you a call, you're going to look into it, and if you buy that property, you're going to pay that dentist well. He may even quit his dentistry practice after that. One of the important things that I do is, as I go to the right location, my eyes are peeled for people out and about their home that I could talk to. I'm going to learn more about what's going on in a 4-block radius by talking to a person that lives there than I am from all the Kane & Scott surveys known to man. A sunny summer day, I'm going to grab some lady on the side who's working in her yard and say, gee, ma'am, you just do a great job with your yard. Do you happen to know of anybody here around this area that is considering selling their home? I would just love to live in this neighborhood. And what you get immediately is all of the neighborhood gossip that gives you an insight very similar to what the mailman may tell you about what's happening in somebody's relationship, that this home, although there's no sign in front of it, it's shortly coming on the market. Those are the 4 biggies. If you're in the construction world, if you're planning on remodeling buildings, if you're planning on doing any new construction, obviously you need relationships with your subcontractors and your city officials. Those people at the permit desk, I'm telling you, have the ability to get something through quick, or if you're just another number, it's going to take its course. So these are people that you should have relationships with. You know, back in the old days, you used to have a real influence on an appraiser. Now, lenders tend to keep as much distance between borrower and appraiser as possible. However, somebody has to let him in the house, right? And so make it a point to know that person, not just what he does for a living, but a little more about him. Also, it doesn't hurt to do a little research on his behalf so that when he shows up, you've already researched the comps in the area. You already know what number you're likely going to get and have that discussion with the appraiser. You're not going to get far, though, without that relationship with them. You will make a decision in your real estate career whether you want to involve other people as partners in your acquisition or whether you would just like to use their money and pay an interest return on that money. I would tell you that at least a third of my own personal portfolio in terms of money that I owe is personal investors. These are people who have money in the bank. Rather than have it sit in the bank at 1.5% interest secured by FDIC up to $100,000, they'll invest that money with me at 6% secured by a first deed of trust on a piece of real estate. And I pay them interest every month, if not a bit of principal and interest every month. You need to make a list of every person you know that has money in a bank at 1.5% and ask what? A question of proposition. Would you, given the right investment, invest X amount of dollars in this piece of property so that I can purchase this property? Your loan will be secured by a deed of trust on the subject property. I'll pay you monthly with a cash out, say, in 7 to 10 years. Rounding out the full team would be a CPA whose expertise is real estate. Again, not all CPAs focus on real estate investors. And so finding one who understands the intricacies of depreciation, write-offs, et cetera, really important, especially if you're going to be exchanging property, sell one for another. The whole idea of a 1031 tax-deferred exchange, very technical little maneuver, needs to be in the hands and the accompaniment of a good CPA. As well, a good real estate attorney who not only helps you draft things and helps you through the questions of acquisition and property management and landlord-tenant law and all of the things that you'll get into with an attorney, but who also becomes someone that you can take your seller to and say, here is a real estate attorney. On me, you've got 2 hours. Ask him any question you want about your situation. I can't tell you how many times I've taken sellers to my attorney and said, I'm paying for 2 hours of your time to ask him any question you want. He's now representing you. Go. And this, of course, creates a situation between you and the seller that you don't have anything to hide and that everything you're doing falls under the principles of good financial, accounting, and legal practices. One of the things on the to-do list, of course, was to create funds available for our use should we find a great piece of property that we need to buy and we're lacking some funds to put this thing together. This is why private investors are an essential element of your team. It's also why having a banker who is willing to give you an unsecured line of credit is an important part of the equation. Now, what happens if you have no credit? Very minimal ability to get an unsecured line of credit. Well, of course, here I am 18 years old. I have no credit, no job, no anything. And it occurred to me that that was something important. I spent my first and only $1,000 on my one and only down payment. If another bird of such character flew up, how am I going to shoot him? I've just spent all my money. So I set off to get lines of credit. And yet, who's going to give me a line of credit? I have no job. I have no money in the bank. I have no anything. So I saved up another $1,000. But then rather than spend it on a next house, what I did is I went to a bank. I said I would like to put $1,000 in a savings account. I would like to freeze that $1,000. I'm not able to use it. And I would like that $1,000 to collateralize a $1,000 line of credit that I can use. And once I repay that $1,000 line of credit in full at its terms and you're completely happy with what I've done, then you can unfreeze it at some point down the line. Well, a fully collateralized line of credit, anybody with a heartbeat could get one of those. There's no risk to the lender whatsoever, right? So I took the $1,000, I borrowed it all, told them I would borrow it all to prove my ability to repay it. You have to borrow it all. But then I took the $1,000 out of this bank, and then, of course, I took that $1,000 to another bank. And I said, I'm going to put this $1,000 in a savings account, and then I would like a $1,000 line of credit. And then I took that $1,000 line of credit and went to a bank after a bank, more banks, more banks, more banks. And I built up 10 different banks. So now I have 10 $1,000 lines of credit that are fully collateralized. And I paid on all of those for 6 months. After 6 months, I went back to the banker and I said, have I proven myself? I've done everything I said I would do. I would like to now have my $1,000 unfrozen, and I would like an unsecured $1,000 line of credit. And of course, I'm dressed as nicely as I could be, as professional as I knew how to be. Every one of those lenders said, you know, you're a sharp young guy, unsecured $1,000 line of credit. Treat it carefully. Well, now I have $10,000 unsecured line of credit. Now, you have to know that in 1976, that bought 8 or 10 houses. Years ago, when I taught 2 different classes at Seattle Pacific University, at the end of those 10-week classes, if you were present in those classes, you would be standing on your desk, and in your greatest barbaric yelp, you would declare under instruction, class, the 3 pillars, and you would say terms, location, expandability. The 3 pillars, if you boiled everything I knew down into 3 words about real estate investing, not having to do with the mindset, not having to do with the work ethic, the toolbox is about terms, location, expandability. it's interesting that every mistake I have ever seen made in real estate breaks one or all of those principles. Remember, real estate has two gears, forward and reverse, and they both move quickly. It's not like you could buy anything and make money in real estate. People buy things all the time, and it gets away from them, and they end up giving them back, destroying their reputation, destroying their credit. There's wrong ways to do this. And so I'm trying to lay out a very simple grid that if you understand what we're talking about in those three areas and understand them fluently, you will not make a mistake. That simple. So there's the overview, and then we would take it from there and break these three things down very intimately. If we were to attack those three pillars, and although for me they flow better off my tongue saying terms, location, expandability, it all starts with location. All of the terms and all of the expandability mean nothing if this property is not located properly. Okay? You could buy the entire town of Othello with a smile and handshake, but the point is, who wants it? So location is critical. And the defining quality of a great location is not mathematics. It's not close to bus lanes. It's not close to shopping. All these things that people think when they say define a great location for investment real estate. I'm going to give it to you in a different way. Okay? The criterion is romance personified within 10 miles of a major employment center. Meaning, if we're talking Seattle area, downtown Seattle. Okay? What do I mean when I say romantic? Okay? Because that seems so vague. Let me boil it down. There's all kinds of investment-grade real estate out there. And what differentiates some from others is the setting of romance. If you think about it, romance is what we live for. It's when everything else goes, it's the one thing we cannot live without. So, in terms of the greater Seattle area, if we think in terms of Green Lake, Queen Anne, East Lake, these things bring about romantic images of water and view and mountains and Starbucks and Cafe Ladro and Serafina, and these sorts of images come to mind. These are things that we cannot live without. Life without romance is not life. Let's put it that way. Okay? And so, in that we're wanting buildings that stay full of people who like to be there, that's where we want to own buildings, in those areas. It's that simple. All the time, I see people struggling to keep an investment property full and with good tenants in Linwood. And it's obvious to me. Name one romantic thought that comes to mind when you think Linwood or Bothell or Kent. Just one. None come to my mind. I don't think one comes to anybody's mind. And again, if we've got an overflux of employment in the area and everything's full, okay, it may work. But again, I'm conservative. I'm wanting to be bulletproof with long-term investments that will stand on their own over a long period of time. And romance in that location is key. Now, even in great neighborhoods, we're going to use some common sense. We're not going to be on major bus lines. We're not going to be on major arterials, and Queen Anne is a great location, but right on Queen Anne Avenue or right on 3rd North or right on 6th West, or we're not going to be on those streets. It's amazing how a block away makes all the difference in the world. So we're using common sense in romantic locations. We go to those locations, and there we begin our hunt. What are we hunting for? Terms. So we have found ourselves in the right location. Physically, we have gotten in our car, we have gone to the right location. We've identified that. We're in love with it. The romance gauge is just bouncing off the right side. Okay. In that location, we're looking for two categories of properties. Category 1, properties that we can buy, do something to, and sell immediately. We'll call those the buy and flip. Okay? Category 2, my favorite category, is the buy and hold. This is the field that we are buying, planting. Forevermore, we will own this field. End of story. 10 Clydesdales could not pull this field away from us once we have it. Now let's go to the easier of the two categories to discuss the buy and flip quickly. All right? Obviously, let's take the greater Seattle area. Medina waterfront is pretty romantic. And yet, are we going to be buying a house for $2 million, fixing it up and hoping to sell it for a profit? No. Is that location romantic? Of course it is. It's wonderfully romantic. But in our romance scale and in the locations we're going to that fall under that criterion, we need to be in an area that has investment grade opportunities. And in the buy and flip, we need to understand that the end number, the number that we are hoping to sell this property for when we're done with what we're doing, needs to be in the scope of range that puts it on the lower third of all properties being sold in that area. In other words, we're dealing in Toyotas, not Rolls Royces. I want to own what 8 out of 10 people on the street can afford to buy from me should they like what I have. I don't want to own a home that 1 out of 1 million has the horsepower to take it down. Okay, so this disqualifies some very romantic locations. As much as I would love to purchase a home on the waterfront of Kirkland, the chances of 8 out of 10 people buying what I have once I'm done with what I'm doing, pretty slim. Okay, so the end product. Now let me give you some numbers that underline that. Let's take the Queen Anne area. Let's be very specific. I want to bring Queen Anne back on the market at $425,000 or less. Okay? Because that would represent the lower 1/3 values of all properties being sold on Queen Anne. All right? Okay. So again, Toyotas, not Jaguars. All right? In the buy and flip, here's the formula. Let's recap. You should know it by now, but I want you to know it intuitively. 1, your acquisition price. Acquisition price plus your closing costs to buy it. That plus 30% of your acquisition price. That plus your rehab costs. Add to that your holding costs. Add to that your selling costs. I want that whole thing done in no longer than 90 days from acquisition to being ready with a bow on it on the market. In and out. And when you add up all of those numbers, I want that end number to represent the lower third of everything on the market in that area. I also want you to have done your homework and see the comparables to know that the number you're bringing it back on the market is a number that will be sold within 60 days. So this takes incredible research. It takes a full knowledge of everything that is sold in that area. Thoreau says, I went to the woods because I wanted to live deliberately. We don't acquire knowledge accidentally. We acquire things deliberately. And the knowledge of what has sold in that area, read title company representative giving you this information on a daily basis. Remember that fax number that you don't need to tell her? This number comes to her every day, and you get this information, and you're out there looking at everything sold, everything listed, so that when you see your bird, your opportunity, you know that if you do this, and this will go back on the market and sell within 60 days at this price or better. The 30% of acquisition If you paid $200 for it, that's $60,000, which is 30% of your $200. That is your margin of profit. If that margin gets cut down any less than 30%, you're taking too much risk. It's not a bird. Okay, so buy and flips are very simple. Now, how do we proactively find these buy and flips? Are we waiting for Windermere to call us and say, oh, I've got a house on Queen Anne for $250,000 that if you put in $10,000, you can sell it for $400? That phone won't ring. We need to be deliberate, proactive in our hunting of properties. Remember, our informants are working on the street. We're literally, through any means you would like to, going to every owner of every single family home whose tax assessed value falls in the range that we're looking for, and we're asking them questions of proposition. Every single one. That's thousands of questions of proposition. And in those thousands of questions, we will find someone who says, yes, this would work well for me to sell you my home for X amount of dollars that fits your formula as a buy and flip. The biggest component of the buy and flip is, first and foremost, to know your market. That has to be just ingrained in you, what that market is, what all of those solds are. If I were to quiz you in that location, I need to be able to take you around and you show me every single home that has sold in your price range in the last 6 months. How many bedrooms, baths, square footage, lot size, everything, so that you know that the market for this potential bird you're looking at is $400,000 on the backside. I need to then purchase it for X. You can work the formula backwards to that point. Another topic of the buy and flip is that oftentimes those transactions are all cash to the seller at closing, which means that you need to have lines of credit available. You need to have a good relationship with your banker who should be able to, with your ability and your knowledge in this, to give you a 6-month to a 1-year loan to buy that property, put your money down, do what you need to do to rehab it, get it back on the market immediately, and done. And that secured financing will evolve into an unsecured line of credit for the amount you need to do that job. I could find that kind of bird tomorrow and make one call to my banker, and he'd simply say, how much do you need for a year? And he would give me the amount of money I need, 100% of the money I need, to buy it and to rehab it. He'd secure his note with a first position deed of trust, all due and payable in a year. Now, that makes my job very easy, but your job, if you don't have that financing lined up, is to make sure you have short-term cash lined up to get in, do the work, get out, repay the source, down the road you go. Turning the page to the buy and hold, which is the second category. Again, we're in the right location. We're looking for 2 opportunities. One, the flip, now the hold. The hold will generate profits untold over the years. Think of the hold as buying a field, and that we are going to buy that field, we're going to plant that field, and we're going to hold it forever. And the longer we hold it, the higher the corn gets. Okay? There are all sorts of negotiable terms in a purchase and sale agreement that need to be negotiated with the seller. Now, let's talk about negotiation for just a second. Remember that slow dance? Remember that relationship that we're dealing with? When we meet this seller to talk about their property, we're going to meet them at their residence. If this is a 6-plex we're buying, we're not going to meet them at the 6-plex. We're going to meet them at their residence. And the reason is simple, is that all available means of persuasion, as Aristotle would put it, are at our disposal in their residence. We see who they are, the way they live, what motivates them, their predispositions, their beliefs, all unveils before us in the form of clues in their residence. We don't get this when we meet them at Denny's over a Happy Meal, right? So we want to be at their residence because these are knowledge clues for us that will help us in our negotiation, Okay? Conversely, we don't meet sellers at our office with all of our pictures around and all of our life around. We're trying to remain as anonymous as possible and wanting to know more about them than they know about us. Negotiation comes down to really who knows more about the other person. And so remember, the best negotiating tool is asking questions and listening. So there we are. We're at the seller's place of residence, if at all possible. And we know that this particular property that we're interested in is going to be a long-term hold. Okay? It's a duplex, a fourplex, an eightplex, a 12plex. But we know based on its location that this is going to be something that we're going to have for a long period of time. So what we're about now to do is to structure a hold that we can live with for a long period of time. Okay. On the buy and flip, the most important term is purchase price. It really is one of very few terms, purchase price and closing date. And we negotiate that purchase price like it's yesterday's news. The buy and hold, the purchase price becomes the least important term. This is where we start thinking differently about real estate. Okay, because remember, our objective is to keep this property for a long period of time. Let's think in terms of 20 years. And if we understood amortization, $2 million at 6% amortizes the same way as $1 million at 12%. Am I right? The point being is that I am more interested in the buy and hold in cash flow than I am in purchase price. I'm more interested in my monthly payment than I am in purchase price. Okay? Now, monthly payment is a function of outstanding principal and the interest being charged. It could be a positive amortization where some principal is being whittled away. It could even start out with a negative amortization where your payment is not even paying the interest. Negative amortizations, of course, always have to turn around in short order. A good tool to use for a short period of time until you get your cash flow working on the property, but at some point that needs to turn and positively amortize itself. But remember in the buy and hold that the most important term is monthly outgo. Because that's real money. That's real. You have to do it. Okay. So we're looking at what are the rents currently? What do we feel the rents could be or should be? Is there any other places we can create an income stream out of the property? Add it all up, and that amount of money that we've got coming in from that property has to pay our mortgage payment, our taxes, our insurance, our maintenance, our utilities, reserves for management and vacancy, all of those things. Remember, back to the very first house, the simple objective, well, the amount coming in needs to be more than the amount going out. And it's up to us to structure that in the negotiable terms of the purchase and sale agreement. In that lump of clay that we're forming between me and the seller, I'm working that clay with very defined objectives of what do I want. And yet that has to also be under the parentheses of does it work for the seller? Okay, so the most important term on the buy and hold is monthly payment. Okay? I am wanting to involve the seller in the financing, obviously. And in order to do that, the seller has to have significant equity in the property. Okay? So now you see how my hunting criterion, I'm in the right location, but do you see what I'm hunting for is terms. And to get the kind of terms I want, I have to have a seller that meets a certain criterion, a certain identity. If this guy just bought this property a year ago, right? He has no equity in the property. My options to get those kinds of terms are very limited. But this guy that's had this thing for 20 years and it's a free and clear property, the door is wide open. Okay, I can build a burger. And again, as my focus is cash flow, start there. Don't get hung up on purchase price. In your buy and hold search, we're creating these terms. Obviously, monthly payment is critical, and we've discussed that. Do not sign up for cash out on a buy and hold for anywhere less than 7 years. Real estate runs in approximately a 7-year cycle, and if you're planning on cashing this person out by virtue of a refinance, you want to benefit from a wave of equity change. And consequently, a cash out less than 7 years, you may not hit that wave of appreciation that you're looking for to raise the bar in order to refinance out of that loan to cash out the seller. So don't sign up for a cash out less than 7 years. Some practical points about what you're looking for in the buy and hold. And I learned this over a lot of years of trying a lot of different things. Think in terms of the most efficient square footage you can buy. Okay? I want 8 units on a piece of land the size of a postage stamp, if possible, versus 8 units spread out over a big piece of land. In other words, high-density zoning properties are more desirable in the buy and hold than low-density zoning properties simply because of the land upkeep and the building upkeep. I'm looking for the most ideal unit you could possibly buy would be about an 800 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. That gives you all the options in the rental world to rent to 2 people in 1 unit, and yet your price per square foot that you're getting out of that unit is tremendous. Versus a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,600 square foot unit, way too much unit to maintain. If you're going to have 1-bedroom units, the ideal size is about 700 feet. Okay? But larger units aren't always better. More square footage isn't always better. Bigger pieces of land isn't always better. I remember as a kid, one of the first plats that I built from scratch were 4 duplexes on an acre. Well, imagine the amount of lawn mow, flower beds to keep up, driveways to keep swept, roofs and gutters to keep cleaned for 8 units spread out over an acre. The single best building I own in my portfolio is a 4-unit on Queen Anne on a 30 by 40 lot. And it resembles a milk carton. It's 4 units straight up. It looks like a milk carton. And believe me, when you flush the toilet on the top floor, it's going about 60 miles an hour when it reaches the lower floor. Perfect. Nothing ever clogs in that building. So be cognizant of those things about your acquisition that don't just buy anything. 1958 crap construction that is a box, it better be in an unbelievably romantic location. I much prefer 1926 brick, high ceilings, hardwood floors. You'll find that when people call on ads, they'll ask you about 3 things. 1, does it have hardwood floors? Huge in the rental world. 2, does it have off-street parking? Also huge in the rental world. 3, you'll have to make the determination, do you or do you not accept pets? I've never had a problem with pets, ever. Had a problem with pets. Pets are a function of their owner. If their owner's responsible, you'll have no problem with pets.
This is the end of Disc 1. Highlights continue on Disc 2.